Hello, I'm Nathan Simmons.
And I'm Dan Fleming.
And we are from Video Monsters Podcast, and we are super excited to be here with some of the cast and crew from Giving Birth to a Butterfly for the Q&A. And oh boy, I got so many questions that we're not going to have time for. We're going to get through as much as we can. But obviously, before we start getting the questions, let's meet all of you. So let's just go around and do some introductions. Ted, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I'm Ted Schaefer. I'm the co-writer and director of Giving Birth to a Butterfly.
And Patrick?
Excuse me. I'm Patrick Lawler, co-writer with Ted of Giving Birth to a Butterfly, and Grapefruit Guy. I'm the guy who chases grapefruit behind the car.
Were those grapefruit? I thought those were just abnormally large oranges.
They probably were. In the original script, they were grapefruit.
For sure. And then finally,
Hi, I'm Gus Burney, and I play Marlene in Giving Birth to a Butterfly.
I'm so glad that all of you could be here. I love this film so much so that when I was asked if we could do this Q&A, I immediately rewatched the film. And in all of the years that I've been at CFF, this is probably the first time that I've watched one feature twice in the same fest, and it was totally worth it. I adore this film. The second time around, I got even more out of it. But I want to start with just some of the very technical components. This film was shot in 16 millimeter, and I love that. It gives it a real, almost like home video quality to it in a way that I think adds to the genuine feel and just to the personality of the film. But what was your reasoning for shooting it in 16?
That was kind of always part of the conception. I generally like to shoot in film, but also for something like this that kind of exists in a world of its own, it feels like it wouldn't, like a lot of it would get lost in digital, I think. And in a way, the texture of 16 really kind of amplifies the magic of the world. So that was one of the main things. I also just like the process of shooting on film, like the way it forces you to prepare on another level. You know, we really could only shoot so many takes. You really had to think about how you're doing it. And it's a film about, you know, it across the board, we were trying to be very specific about everything in the film. This is just like a way that amplifies that level of the process.
I'm glad that you mentioned that you're very specific about what this film is about. One of the things that was very interesting to me, it's kind of right in the title there with the giving birth, that this film there's a heavy motif of motherhood, but the choice seems to focus more on evolution, like the evolving nature of motherhood more than the birth itself. While most films tend to, when there's a motherhood film, it's tend to focusing on what the baby's going to bring to this world. Whereas this tends to focus more on how the mother is going to change, so much that there are two mothers in this film that go on a journey together. I'm hoping you could kind of get more into the genesis of that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was very important to us from the beginning, which is also a butterfly is an evolution. It's not a butterfly is a birth, obviously. And I know Patrick and I mean, a lot of the way we work is pretty intuitive. So we kind of start with ideas and then we sort of build kind of just whatever comes to us. And we spend a lot of time kind of writing out thoughts and then expanding on those ideas. But I also think that's something we talked about that, like, you don't really see much, like movies that are about having children, like you said, are about the children, not really about the parents. And we were interested in parents and surrogate parents. That was something that's always, I think, interested us for various reasons, but also because it's a film about how you are shaped by the people around you and influenced by not just the people, but the society around you. And so the metaphor of having a child works, but also I think it's more interesting to see somebody or two people that are at a different stage in their life and have had or are about to have kids, figuring out their own rebirth.
Yeah, I love that this is basically a coming of age story, but not in the way that you would expect. You know, it's not dealing with the young parents. It's not dealing with some of these high schoolers or college age kids. I'm not entirely sure the age of everyone, but I love that the themes that are present are there for everyone, but especially highlighted with the mother's journey. Gus, what about for you? What was some of your inspiration as you were playing this role? Not only, not only as a burgeoning mother, but also someone who is trying to find herself in this world.
Yeah, I mean, I think the two of them wrote these two leading women so well, which was interesting because it was two guys. But like, honestly, I remember when I first got the script, I think within the first 10 pages, I was like, oh, this is something that I feel like I understand. It's pretty basic. I like these characters. And then as it went on, it just like developed into this crazy whirlwind of like, I don't know, it was so not what I expected. And I think that's what was so fun about playing this part, was that they were human beings that felt like real people, but also existed in this world that wasn't real life. It felt like a different universe. And I think that's why when you watch it, you kind of are transported into this weird alternate reality of like life as it is, but also not as it is. And these metaphors that I think we can all interpret in our own way. Like, I want to discuss them and know what everyone's opinions are, but I also have my own that I'm like, that might not be yours. That might not be what you take away from the film. And I like that everyone takes away something different. I've seen it a couple times and everyone I watch it with is like, oh, I took something else from that. And I like that.
Yeah. Your character specifically, Gus, mentions the value that she has with participation in the artistic medium, not so much as the creation versus the artistic.
Yeah.
Participation. And I wondered how you felt your character kind of evolved through her journey with that ideal.
Yeah, I love that line because, yeah, she's an appreciator of the arts and not a part of it. And I think Marlene is a character that I think you don't normally see on screen, of somebody that is just a quiet, participating part of life that maybe isn't normally the star of the show. And so I think I liked that I didn't feel like I had to make any strong choice with her, that she could just exist as she is, kind of figuring herself out. And with Annie alongside these two women who are at different points in their life, but are still figuring themselves out. And that you don't really have to be at a certain age to accomplish that. And so, yeah, I think I was 18 or 19 at the time playing that part. And I also like that you don't really know how old she is. And she could be 18, she could be 25. And it's a universal thing of like, yeah, she's just, she doesn't really know what she is yet.
So, Gus, you mentioned that these characters are incredibly well written for women, which is odd coming from two men. And that's something that I wanted to address a little bit. This is a very female-centric film, and I think that these are very powerful women, very intricate women, women that have a lot of character and depth. I think everyone in the film does, but the fact that you show so many different types of women in such a short period of time, obviously, this film deals a lot with motherhood. This film deals a lot with that sort of giving birth and that dual nature of creating life, but also when you create life, you have to give up a part of yourself. But what was some of the inspiration, or at least what was some of the maybe like guiding structure in the writing process of how to actually write these characters so genuinely in a way that doesn't feel pandering? It doesn't feel it doesn't feel pedantic. You know, what was some of that writing process? And Ted, that's for you or Patrick, either one. Since you co-wrote it, let's get some co-answers.
Go ahead, start, Ted.
I start.
Because my cat is in the litter box over here, so I just.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, that was definitely something at a certain point we thought about. Oh yeah, we are. These are. I don't think we went into it like we're going to write a movie starring women, because that seems like a great idea. It just sort of naturally evolved, and I would say the guiding principles really. When you write, every character is sort of a part of yourself. So I think a lot of that is what comes through, where, you know, if you take the approach of writing your characters like people, then they tend to come out like people, and they're not standing. I think that, like Gus, what you're saying is true. It was really important for us to have, especially those two characters, feel incredibly authentic and real, because a lot of the world around them wasn't exactly, and shifted. And some of the other characters, I think, hopefully seem unreal and become more real, whereas they kind of consistently seem real, but then have to kind of figure out how to deal with it. So I think that was a big part of it, was these two women really need to feel like real human beings, whereas the other characters can kind of oscillate because they are the structurally the background. Like, that's how the movie works, I think, is that you have these people that feel real, that you can follow, even though the world starts to get kind of wobbly. But yeah, Patrick, is there anything else?
Yeah, well, first of all, when we wrote this, there was no way that we could have ever anticipated the current Supreme Court decisions, which gives a whole different meaning to the word motherhood. Now, I think that it's just really kind of scary. But anyway, I know one thing when in creating with Ted, these women, part of what I did was I channeled my mother because my father is very much the character, the Paul Stark character, because he was kind of controlling, and he had a dream of being a chef and all of that. But my mother's had this inner strength. I mean, he was an alcoholic, and my mother had this inner strength that I've always drawn upon when I do anything with female characters, because without her, I wouldn't be who I am. So, and other strong women. And I think the my birth mother was my mother, but I also had a creative mother who recognized my talent as a writer early in my life and helped to direct me in an area that led to my creativity. Otherwise, I would never have been a writer ever. So, yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned modern events that are happening right now, because there was one line. This film is just full of solid female advice, honestly. And one of the lines that really hit me watching it today was, "Never trust a man who can take things away."
Yeah.
That paired with, a drowning man will grab anything, especially a drowning woman. This certainly felt me with male pride. No, not really, but I love that it really can just take these honest truths that the women are telling each other. So much that the men they're not invited to this, and I kind of like that. It's that sisterhood feeling, the passing down of knowledge from one mother to a new mother. And that self-actualization that you just talked about, Patrick, with your writing mother, that I feel really comes through in the film with the twins that come toward the end.
Yeah.
Who are there to speak some very interesting truths while kind of cloaking what they say in unreality. I really enjoyed that aspect.
Or poetry. Yes. Same thing.
There's some great lines throughout this entire movie, and also tying in with what Dan was just saying of a drowning man will reach for anything, including a drowning woman. I love this, that in the pet store scene, when Gus, your character, is asking about the names of the fish, and Owen's like, "Oh, this one's Homer." Like, "Oh, after the poet." I don't know. He really likes Simpsons. I love the fact that the owner of the pet store is just kind of like, this cartoon. Sure, why not? And then you immediately quote Homer. It brings so much depth to these characters in a way that feels so real and so genuine. And that's something that, again, that is something that was driving this movie for me, is how genuine everything felt. Like the entire movie, I was instantly brought in with its charm, because I know the people in this world. I know, the very bizarre mother who's not really living in reality. I know the guy who's like, what college? I'm just going to work at a pet store. I know everyone in this film. And again, it brought so much reality that by the time that it gets to the end, and I don't want to spoil things if anyone who's watching this Q&A has not seen the movie yet, but I love how the ending, it doesn't break that reality. It almost gives this very deep appreciation for almost like this real world magic and sort of this fantasy of what is the beauty of life, because there's some questionable things that happen in the end of did it happen or not, and I love that. And I just wanted to get kind of each of your takes on, how do you find that beauty and that magical realism and that fantasy within the real world? Again, very sadly, especially within current situations, but we don't have to go down that rabbit trail. Mostly just wanting to talk a little bit about, again, some of that beauty and that magic in the world. Guess let's start with you this time.
Oh, wow. I mean, I was just thinking, this isn't a universal answer for everyone, but I think that's probably why we're all artists, because it's letting yourself tap into that part of yourself where you really look at the world. And especially being an actor, it's like you can transform and put in situations that you never would have been in. And I got to do this film with my actual mother. So we're talking about motherhood. And that was talk about a magical experience for me. She's my best friend. And to do this with her was such a gift. And I would watch her from across the room and be like, oh my gosh. And I still, when I watch the film, I take away my mom's performance because I think she stole the show. I don't know. I think it's doing things in the arts and tapping that part of yourself. I don't know. It saves you from sometimes thinking into reality.
Yeah, I thought about Patrick. I don't know if you remember. I don't remember the poet who did this, but there's a collection of poetry that Patrick actually recommended to me, and the introduction is so incredible, and it talks about how, I'll try to paraphrase it the best I can, that there's sort of a blight in modern society because a lot of things like theology, religion, and science are sort of supposed to give answers to things, but they often make things seem a lot worse. And it has to do with seeing the world on a much more macro level. And obviously the world is getting smaller and smaller with the internet and travel and what have you. And that makes everything just kind of seem gray. And the thing that art does, good art at least, it allows you to see the life through microcosms. So seeing a flower, seeing, when you're walking down the street and the sun's kind of hitting a tree in a way and creating a pattern on the ground, like things like that are the things that I think make us want to be alive. And it's really easy when you're looking at everything from a 1,000-foot view to forget that art, the sort of like minor, beautiful things in life that just sort of occur are really the more important things, because you can really only control things within a very small sphere when you're a human being.
Yeah, and a collection of butterflies, like a herd of reindeer or whatever, but a collection of butterflies is called a kaleidoscope. And I think that's not only indicative of the kind of the way that Ted and I write in this kaleidoscopic sort of way, where we kind of take various images and various scenes and kind of put them all together, but also in terms of a theme, is that there is this reality that we confront on a daily basis, but there's these other sort of magical elements, and all together they create this prismatic sort of image. And that, I think, is captured in the film quite well when you contrast the various characters in the beginning of the film to the end of the film, etc. So,
bridging on how art allows you to kind of see the microcosmos of everything. There's a very metatextual device towards the end of the film, the train. And I like that the train can take you anywhere you want to go as long as it's not away from here. And I was kind of hoping all of you might let us into where you would take that train if given the chance.
Oh, that's a great question. I love it. So, and I would say probably here. In other words, in the film, I I would take that train into my own kind of creative world, wherever that world is, and that's kind of where I dwell a lot. Anyway, so
yeah, the internal journey. So I would go deep. I'd go deep. I don't know. There's probably stuff in there that I'd love to discover.
I'm gonna say the beach because it's a rainy day, so would love to go to the beach on that day.
So I was thinking Chat Film Fest, but I'm already here. So there's one more question that I wanted to ask at least. And for anyone who's watching this and just has all of these burning questions, much in the same way that we do, don't worry. We're going to have at least some of you, hopefully all of you, not sure how many of you, back to our to the Video Monsters podcast to really, really dive in deep with this film and get at some of these burning questions, because I've got like 20 lined up and I'm just having to pick one right now. But I love that I love the dual nature of this film about, dealing with identity theft, and it's an identity protection service. And, I was thinking about that in terms of what part of the identity is being protected. And so much of this film is dealing, again, with how we present ourselves and how the world sees us. You have pregnancy, you have the stage names and personas, you have the dad wearing that chef shirt and an apron, even though he is taking an order. He's not even very good at that. Were both of their names Trudy's or Judy and Trudy? But the
Judy and Trudy.
Okay, so Judy and Trudy. So
it doesn't matter.
Right, because there's two of them. There's so many dual aspects of this film, and tying all of that in with Janice, but also another great line is the how those remakes are. They can never decide which part of the past to make part of the present. And that's something that people have to go through every single day. Our past shapes who we are, but it can shape us either in a very negative way or a very positive way. And people have to sort of make that decision of how is this going to have an impact on me, and where am I going to go with this? What parts of my experiences am I going to take with me? And Ted, I know that you mentioned in some of our correspondence before this that this was a very personal film for you. Obviously, we don't have time to get into how personal, just for sake of time, but with some of that very personal nature, with this movie dealing with bringing our past with us, as Dan mentioned, getting on that train and leaving as long as we don't leave here. How much of that was, again, sort of a driving force behind this film? And then Gus, as we're going around answering this, how did that sort of shape the way that you approach this character?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very big part of it. Patrick and I always talk about our past. That's a big point of departure whenever we're trying to write something, and the ways that the past shapes you. So the idea of sort of creating two versions of the self it's a very Jungian thing. And my mom's a therapist and Patrick's a poet. There's a nice combination of things going through all of our. But I do think that is a really important thing that, we all have to deal with, and figuring out. I think we're really fascinated too with how much of your past that you have no control over shapes who you are. So especially through parenting. So the way that the lineage of any family kind of progresses and creates these people, we're all sort of unfortunately put together by both our parents' genes and their psychological flaws. So that's something that I think has been a constant throughout our writing.
Yeah. Well, to speak to that too, Marlene's family, clearly the past, she comes from a very dysfunctional household that doesn't feel like there's a lot of love there, or it's just not able to be placed upon her when she needs it. And kind of, I thought what was so beautiful was that like the family you come from doesn't have to be the family that is the best family for you. Me and Annie, this road trip, they kind of, yes, there was a mother-daughter element that came, but I also felt more like sisters, and this bond that was very familial. And I don't know. I don't know. I think there was a lot of damage that she's not even really aware of. And I could have dove into all of her past that, got her here and who impregnated her and the whole story of her and Teddy. But I also think that what's beautiful about the film is kind of where it starts and where it ends. That's all really you need to know. And I liked kind of the present momentness of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole theme of the doppelganger sort of, the two sides of, that very Jungian sort of way was an essential theme to the whole film in some ways, that you couldn't really understand who you were if you were only half of who you were, so it was kind of trying to merge those things together in a kind of a wedding, that wedding dress in the beginning and then the wedding dress that she has at the end. And it was kind of a merger. I think of kind of opposites in a way, kind of like, again, a kind of a Jungian sort of way, but very critical to understanding the film was this kind of giving birth to another level of consciousness. I think that's what the film is about in some ways. Of course, it's about many other things too. It's great.
and there's some great bookending. I'm glad that you mentioned the wedding dress at the beginning, and then at the end, there's so much dialogue that seems like it's just throwaway dialogue that then is vitally important to how things end up. And again, the ending could be fantasy, could be real, could just be finding oneself. It is absolutely beautiful. I adore this film. Before I go gushing on any further, Dan, do you have one last burning question that you need to ask?
I do not, because I feel that anything at this point that I ask will just really spiral out into 1,000 more questions. So it's best to the attention span not to get into that right now, I think.
Much like the cinnamon buns or the map leading to Janice, it would just keep spiraling out of control. All right, Ted, Patrick, Gus, thank you so much. I adore this film. I cannot wait for it to be in wide release. It better be in wide release because I love it and I need to watch this again. I need to share it with people. It is a beautiful film. It's so technically proficient. There's so much for us to analyze. And anyone who's ever listened to Video Monsters before knows just how much we analyze movies. And this one is certainly going to be one of the top movies from CFF for us. So again, thank you so very much for joining us. Any final parting words that you want to give to the Chat Film Fest listening audience?
Just thanks so much for checking out the film, and I hope you found something on the journey.
Excellent.
Gus, Patrick, any parting words?
Oh, again, thank you for viewing this film. It was a very personal journey for, I think, everybody involved. Certainly Ted and I, as we were going through this, we went through, I don't know how many revisions and edits, Ted, like lots, but every time we discovered something else in the film that we loved. So
yeah, definitely. I also think any age, any gender can watch this and walk away with something and learn a piece about themselves. So yeah, definitely watch the film. I'm so proud of it.
Absolutely. All right. If you have not yet checked out Giving Birth to a Butterfly, go watch it right now. If you've already watched it, just get back to watching more CFF. We love you. Respect cinema.